So yes, good evening, everybody out here, and welcome to the 23rd episode of Tech Tuesdays, which also happens to be the 7th episode of Season 2 of Tech Tuesdays. For those who don't know me, I'm Subhash Ghosh. I'm the founder of TechTuesdaysUK. Given that this is happening in virtual, a couple of ground rules. Kindly at all times, keep your video on and your mic on mute. This event, like always, is getting recorded and will be published later on all our digital channels. And if you have a question, raise a hand or just ping me on the chat, and I'll make sure that you're being heard and you're being seen. Once again, I extend my warm welcome to all our esteemed panel members for this evening and all the guests present out here. For some of you who are attending this particular episode for the first time, Tech Tuesdays UK stemmed from the very idea of building a community that ideates, nurtures, and then fosters a free-flow discussion of disruptive technologies which have the potential to impact 1 billion lives. Tech Tuesdays UK is a monthly event which takes place on the first Tuesdays of every month, where we spend an hour and a half having conversations around technology. The most unique thing of Tech Tuesdays, as you realize, that this is a free-flow discussion where we do not have a given script or any pre-decided question, or any set of speakers, or moderation. I would earnestly request each one of you spread the good word around during the event as well as after the event. Our Twitter handle is #TechTuesdaysUK, and on LinkedIn we also sort of present as #TechTuesdaysUK. You may also catch up with the earlier episode of Tech Tuesdays on YouTube, where we have close to about 20,000 subscribers. As is the practice, after this episode ends, we will reach out to some of you and take your thoughts and feedbacks and comments on Tech Tuesdays or this particular episode. This video, which we captured, is going to be shared across all our touch points. Now, as you may be aware, every episode of Tech Tuesdays is based on a particular technology theme. And the theme for this evening is digital twin. And to drive the discussion today, we have an amazing panel with us, represented by Namrita Mahendru. Namrita is the Chief Digital Officer and the Chief Information Officer at one of the divisions of the US 100 billion Aditya Birla Group. Joining Namrita in the panel is Vaibhav Panchal. Vaibhav is the Director of Media Entertainment at Microsoft UK. So welcome all, and to the panelists, the show is yours. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Right. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me, Subhash. I'm Webs. I am working with media entertainment, but I have worked quite a lot with digital twin in many different industries over here. A few of them are, if you talk about digital twin, there are smart cities, there is manufacturing, there are sports, media entertainment. Everywhere there is a version of digital twin is over here. So Namrita, do you want to kind of quickly tell us about your journey with digital twin so far?
Sure. So I've had, good evening, everyone. I've had the opportunity to sort of, start dabbling in the whole digital twin space since the start of the pandemic. I think that is what got me started. I have been working in both the consumer and the manufacturing space, but predominantly in the manufacturing space over the last 5 to 7 years. And that's where a lot of the work in the digital twin space has started. So this is predominantly manufacturing and supply chain, and I can elaborate a little bit more on some of the work that I've been doing. But a lot of it is stemming from just making supply chains more resilient, more transparent, and using digital twins towards that. And similarly with manufacturing, I work in chemical manufacturing, so there, beyond the operational and the productivity side, safety becomes a huge issue. And using digital twins for enabling safety is the other area where we've done some amount of work.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting that you talked about safety. So working Microsoft, you do get some insights on how everything started. And one of the things, interestingly, is if you see the trends of digital twin, how it emerged. We are going all the way back to 1970s, 1980s, right? It started from the early record that I looked at was something called mirroring system, right? When NASA engineers were creating Apollo 13, then there was an oxygen cylinder explosion, and we are talking about you're working with very limited technology. So they created a mirror system over here so that they can go ahead and address those kind of scenarios on lunar missions. So if you take that from Apollo 13 until today, it kind of looks like the world has gone in terms of the mirroring models, where you find trying to get the early inception of this concept. Then came, and I think that led until early 2000s, and then that kind of converted into a simulation and 3D printing as technology advanced and cloud models started emerging. And when there was more robustness around the cloud model, then came the connected IoT systems and sensors and all that kind of coming in, and connectivity to the cloud and edge. And now we are on the hyper-connected world over there, right? So safety has been the common thread that you're working on pandemic, which is very recent, versus where it started in mirror system. I mean, what kind of areas of impact that you see based on how the entire industry has changed over here?
So I think one of the things that has become hugely important in the manufacturing sector has really been around, creating that transparency and building up that resilience. And I think also, we've talked about the VUCA world for over a decade now, maybe longer, in our conversations. So I think that volatility that we see is significantly increased. It's exponentially increased, and also the pace at which it happens is far more frequent than ever before. So given that, I think the digital twins became extremely important also from a point of view of preparing for a lot many more different scenarios to simulate those kind of environments or those kind of business scenarios that one had not anticipated previously. I think that's one area where we've seen a significant change. The second area where I think there's been a significant change is in terms of, from a point of view of saying, what is the art of the possible? Because once we started doing scenario planning, we realized that the canvas could be much wider. So ideas that were just drawn up on paper, and one felt that there isn't a way of and it wasn't realistic to try them out in the real world. A lot of that has started now happening from a digital twin perspective. So I think those are the two areas that I see hugely sort of accelerated beyond the usual sort of use cases that you would have for a digital twin. So in manufacturing, as I said, it's a lot around productivity enhancement, looking at efficiency, looking at making sure that you have, from a quality point of view, a golden batch. From a performance point of view, how do I make sure that if there's energy, and energy is a huge area even as far as sustainability is concerned, so how do I make sure that I can identify the wastages, I can look at the consumption patterns, and I can optimize those. So these are some of the areas that we typically see having picked up hugely. Again, for us in our chemical industry, particularly in commodity chemicals, power or electricity is the largest variable cost. So from that point of view, if you can actually make even single digit optimizations from a percentage point of view, that is going to run into millions of dollars, sometimes tens of millions of dollars. So, yeah.
So doesn't it feel, you kind of covered brilliantly about various applications of digital twin and the prominent scenarios that we are coming to B2B space, right? But one thing I observed, I've been with digital twin for approximately 9-ish years now, in various fashion and forms, whether it comes to smart cities, smart buildings, all the way to public transport and manufacturing. It looks like, based on their applications, the definition of digital twin has constantly been updated.
Yeah.
right? As the technology involved, as the use cases involved over here, right? The definition has always received, like, iPhone's version system. There is a new definition. Of course, we did not have a digital twin 1 or 2, 3, 4. But I think Industry X, Industry 4.0 and 5.0 might be a good benchmark to kind of define what digital twin is and what it's going to be. I know that you have been working a lot on Industry 4.0 and you are paving the way for the entire industry for Industry 5.0. So how would you define, if I have to take a snapshot of 4.0 or Industry X and 5.0, what would be the right definition of these two?
Yeah, I think, Vibhav, that's a very interesting point, because where we were looking at Industry 4.0, and again, beyond the digital twins within manufacturing, I've spent about a decade, the 2+ decades of experience I have. So I think a lot of the focus with 4.0 has been around saying, how do we look at productivity enhancement, operational excellence? Those are the buzzwords. Those are the actual, sort of ROI. All the ROI metrics are centered around those, or were centered around those in the 4.0 era.
Yeah.
I think in the Industry 5.0 lens, it's really bringing down beyond the productivity sort of, siloed lens, the human factor and the planet factor, the sustainability factor together. And I think that is the huge difference between, saying, how do we look beyond just productivity from a manufacturing lens? And that's why when I talked about safety, it's not just safety of the plants, but it's also safety of the people that we're talking about. And that's, the lens coming in. From a digital twin perspective, I think it's also about, the kind of autonomy that you start giving. Because again, we're looking at, it's not just a digital twin working in a silo. And, you are talking about potentially trialing out autonomous agents. You're looking at giving additional, sort of decision-making abilities to a lot of some of these autonomous agents, as you start to look at the landscape, even if it is in a POC pilot stage, but the reality is that's what you're heading towards. I think the other fundamental change which has happened is that you don't necessarily have AI, and I'm digressing a little bit over here, only as a tech which is subservient to you. As we've seen with Gen AI, those roles have reversed. Those roles have evolved, like you said. And today we have, AI as a peer. We have AI as, as sometimes, even as a manager in certain roles. So given that context, and coming back to digital twins, that has a direct bearing on, on the ecosystem, not just directly on digital twins, but on the entire ecosystem. And from a sustainability point of view, again, if I look at it, from a 5.0 lens, I would say that with the digital twin, it is now possible to actually start looking at a lot of the R&D work that we've been doing so far in, let us say, open labs, using a lot of materials, taking very long time frames to actually, turn around a new product development, to something that is done today with data analytics, with digital twins, in much shorter periods of time, in an environmentally safe manner, and saving on our carbon footprint by having teams sort of collaborate across. For example, we have offices in the US, Germany, Thailand, India, just to name a couple of destinations. The R&D teams from these geographies were doing things in silos and then exchanging notes at some point in time. There's a lot more collaboration which is possible today. So I would say a lot of this, when you look at it from a sustainability lens and utilizing digital twins for that, would come sort of center stage.
Right. So if I kind of take that and kind of at least put some paraphrasing around it, I think the two key factors that are introduced between existing Industry X and where we're heading are humans, and safety parameter that started from 1970s all the way is still ongoing. Okay. And second one is I'm going to use my 5-word Gen AI. I've said it for today, so I've done my today's task for saying AI. But the AI is a new introducing factor that is taking more prominent seat over here, right? And if you look at industry sentiment right now, they are usually inversely proportional. That's the perspective. There might be some truth, there might be some information. So it would be good to understand, like you have machineries, you have robotics. Now AI is bringing agents that can do a lot of clerical work. And we are trying to focus more on sustainability, humans and the planet as well, right? So if there is a simple equation around it, what would that look like, between the machineries and agents and humans, and the more I am seeing around the industry over here, I think there is a lot more seriousness around sustainability targets than what it had before. Because and I'm going to use some bold words or bold sentences, I think the industry seriously is moving away from just buying green credits to hide behind the sustainability target. And there are actually a lot of initiatives that makes a difference when it comes to carbon emission that are going on. So sustainability is quite prominent over here. Human over here, we still have to figure that out, unravel how the autonomous agents and AI will sit very well with humans, right? Machinery is not going anywhere. Robotics are not going anywhere. In last 2 decades, I think we have built quite a robust framework methodology around safety, deployments, operations on this. But I don't think there is a model yet available where you bring human agents, machinery, agents means AI agents, and machinery over here. So how will that dynamic fit over here? And what does that mean for anyone who is getting into digital twin or who is getting into manufacturing industry today?
So I think this is about keeping humans in the center. So when I talked about, these 3 pillars of saying there is obviously the machinery, there is, the sustainability angle and the human angle. The way I'm looking at it is with Industry 5.0, it's really humans in the center, and it's looking at, saying if human well-being has to be, kept front and center, then you need to have, the sustainability angle taken care of. Because if you don't have the resources, if you're impacting your environment, then there are going to be issues in terms of the human angle, in terms of the work environments, the safety, in the chemical industry per se, working in those hazardous environments. So all of that comes into play. I'd say the machinery, again, like you said, is going to continue to stay. The interesting thing over here for me is that, how does the balance change? And I think one of the things that, you start looking at is what is the impact of the risk of one on the others? And I think that becomes a very important factor. And I don't want to sort of, jump the gun and go on to a different tangent. But I think when you start looking at it from a perspective of, saying, how do I balance, productivity versus sustainability versus humans, keeping the humans in the center? I think one has to constantly look at that lens, that decision-making lens of saying, what is the impact of this going to be, of whatever decision we are taking, on the human being? What is the level of risk? Is it a high, medium, or low risk that we are looking at, per se, when we are talking about making a change and using digital twins or, associated technologies? So that's the way I would look at it. Keep the humans in the middle, and then have this risk sort of, framework in mind in terms of saying, how far are humans going to get impacted? How far is the planet going to get impacted? What is the impact going to be on, your productivity? And that would be sort of, the lowest level amongst the 3.
I think all the systems over here that we spoke about, so everybody has agreed the environmental impact, because by end of the day, everybody is trying to measure in a business with the metrics that everybody understands, right? There is a energy efficiency, which is equivalent to a certain monetary benefits. there is an increase in productivity or predictive capacity that increase in productivity or cost operations, right? Now there is a unit that everybody has accepted in the last 10 years or so, which is around the CO2 save, right? The green credits over here, right? It's still possible to measure all these individual units when you're looking at a business as a P&L owner, right?
Yeah.
Or as a consultant, that this is the amount of hours or financial impacts that we have done in your business. This is the amount of sustainable equal CO2 carbon credits or CO2 emissions that we have saved for you. What do you think will become the unit with humans over here, right? Mental health or safety, yes, number of accidents or incidents per year is one. We have a lot of companies, oil and gas, and they're trying to do like a zero incident for 2 years, 5 years, that's one. But if you have to have a common denominator that all the organizations can use, and I know that it has not been solved yet, but where is that industry leaning towards? Like, what would be the measure of unit for humans to say, yes, we all agree on this uh, this particular equivalent of CO2 emission saves over here that applies to human that we can call out we made an impact. What would that be like? Like, that's a very interesting topic that everybody is trying to solve.
Yeah, I don't think you can zero it down to just one thing as far as humans are concerned. That's, again, a personal perspective. This is what I've seen in the space. I think it's going to be a confluence of 3 or 4 things.
Okay.
Which is the autonomy, because when we talk about, taking away decision-making powers from humans, these seem like very small acts of, creating value in the human being's life. But actually, what is the mental, like you rightly said, what is the mental impact? What's the emotional impact of that on that human being by feeling disempowered?
Yes.
That needs to be studied, and that is an area, because the power balance between humans and machines is an area which is relatively unexplored, and that power balance, that equation, is going to change, as AI becomes more powerful, as we move from narrow AI to AGI, at a certain point in time. And understanding what is the impact of that power balance changing on humans, that's going to become a very, very critical factor. I think the other aspect is there are 2 ends of the spectrum as I have seen it. Either humans are extremely, suspicious of technology, or they are over trusting, and there are research and reports which actually say that they are over trusting as far as a decision recommended by a machine or an AI model is concerned. Now that is a very dangerous territory for humans to operate in, per se, because while AI is not conscious, but AI can nudge, can influence, and that's already happening. They're already influencing our decisions. They're already nudging us to take certain decisions. So I think that goes back to the power balance, subconsciously, that AI is exerting on us. So I think that is going to be important. Some kind of a metric around that autonomy piece, some kind of a metric around the safety piece that you talked about. And therefore, that brings me to trust. And if I had to boil it down to one thing, it would be, what is the trust factor that humans would have, with AI, and can that be? And that's not going to be easy, because there are cultural nuances to it, there are contextual nuances to it, there are industry nuances to it. So there are many aspects to it. But I don't think we'll solve the answer over here in this panel.
Yeah, of course. I'm just trying to see where the industry is trying to lean towards, or what are the factors they are even considering right now.
So autonomy, safety, and figuring out, where do you create some level of, what level of trust makes sense is are some of the areas that we are looking at. Of course, security is there. That's sort of an underpinning one. But yeah, those would be 3 or 4 areas particularly.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to turn the wheel more in terms of the very, like we talked about definition, we talked about applicability, we talk about the emerging trends over here. But if I need to come down to year 2024, 7th of August, which is tomorrow, right? Looking at some practical areas over here, right? We are two different dimensions of the same umbrella. I'm working in a technology provider, enabler, hyperscaler world, and you are working in terms of the industry where you're, trying to adopt that. Now, there are a couple of pieces. If you look at the ecosystem, there is the legal, there's a consultants and SIs on the process and execution. Then there are technology provider as hyperscalers as Microsoft, and then there is the industry itself, Aditya, Birla Chemicals, like one of the huge names in the space, right? So what would you recommend someone to start looking at in terms of the rising opportunities and declining opportunities, right? Because the trends are moving quite dramatically over here, right? So if we talk about kind of like a short-term, medium-term, long-term, in the immediate opportunities in the next, let's say, 4 quarters, what are the things that are emerging quite sporadically over here? I can talk about as a technology provider, but as a domain expert, what kind of areas do you see over there?
I think, from a tech perspective, if you were to look at it, I'd say the plus AI gets added to pretty much everything in our lives.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the digital twins, again, what is the role that AI, Gen AI can play over there? I think we're going to see that kind of accelerate. Now, from a pure manufacturing point of view, I think where we are struggling with is from an ROI perspective, but are we finding certain use cases which could provide value? I think we're still experimenting with those. So that's an area to continue experimenting with, because it's a little bit like the cost of technology. When we started off with mobile phones, or when we started off with the supercomputers, it'll be a journey. I see these costs sort of coming down over a period of time. Is it going to happen over the next 1 year? Maybe not as dramatically as that, but I'd say that depending on the industry, because digital twins, as you rightly said, is not just focused on supply chain and manufacturing. There are enough use cases in the consumer industry. We've got within our group financial services, we've got within our group fashion and retail, and I think the adoption across some of those industries with digital twins, combined with AI or Gen AI, is a different ball game. So I'd say that look out for that plus AI sort of combination. That's for one. I think the second aspect I would say is look at it from a perspective of where are you finding value creation happening with digital twins, because that landscape itself is changing. The use cases are maturing. There is a lot more work that is now available. So the use cases that you pick up or that you choose could be very different from what you were picking up 5 years back or 10 years back. And I think that's the second area that I'd say I have personally seen sort of shift or evolve. I think the third area is around, while we've skirted around it, we haven't really talked about the responsible side of it. And I think that becomes extremely important because of the fact that you're looking at a lot of data that you're dealing with, and as you get beyond, again, manufacturing and supply chain, in fact, even in supply chain and manufacturing today now, with the kind of sustainability sort of measures that you have, where within scope 3 you're looking at the entire ecosystem, you're not just looking at your own enterprise. So it becomes extremely important to be mindful of that element, that how are you managing that data, and whether it is with your partners, whether it's with your customers, when you're creating, you're using this data for digital twins, you're producing this data as an output of digital twins. Some of it, when we talk about consumer or human digital twins, it becomes even more pertinent. And I think that's a third area that I'd say that one would be looking at in terms of some of the rising trends as I'm seeing in the space. But I don't know what you're seeing, Vaibhav, coming from a sports and media lens. What are some of the things that
sports media is interesting, but you are quite right in terms of the data and its application. So if there is none, by the way, before we say anything. The biggest one over here is on data. But before I kind of get into the sports and industry, I just want to kind of double down over here. The amount of that data that we produce in manufacturing per hour or per day is ginormous, right? And I'll come back to why I'm asking that question as a technology provider, because there are a lot of part over here. But if you can just highlight how the correlation of data in this industry is the impact, how do you even manage that kind of do as an industry specialist? And then I can come over and talk about as a technology provider, what we are doing over there in terms of what data is useful, how do you do it? Like there's a safety threat, there's all that, right? How do you kind of see that, especially with moving the industry from into industry 5.0? And while you're answering that, just give me 30 seconds. I will also go and fetch some water. Yeah, I'm listening to you. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So I think there are 2 or 3 lenses that I'd look at this from. The first one is around the fact that, when you are looking at this huge amount of data at play, you're obviously, partnering with a lot of hyperscalers. You're partnering with a lot of data platforms, creating our own data platforms, to sort of house this data, to have that unified single source of truth in terms of the data that is available, whether it's machine data or whether it is, IT data. So that's one. The second element is that I think when you start looking at the data and when you start looking at what's happening with the amount of data with AI, I think that is a huge challenge from an infrastructure and management cost point of view. And I think, to my mind, what Spotify did to Sony is what we require right now in terms of the volume of data that we have, because just the kind of money that any enterprise is spending on managing that data is humongous. So I think that's so ripe for disruption. I don't know who will do it, but that's maybe my cue to you.
Yeah, sure. So thanks a lot for that. Let me talk about from the manufacturing, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's automotive, whether it's chemical engineering. I think we are seeing similar patterns over there. And the pendulum always swings, right? There's always that, hey, do we need all the data on edge? We don't want to do anything with cloud. The costs are very high. What do you do around it, right? And then there's a, no, we need to create a lot of this capacity simulation model, predictive analysis. The business case makes sense. Let's put the data, everything on cloud. And then the pendulum swing is kind of back and forth in terms of between, okay, now what data do we need to send, right? I think I kind of gathered some statistics just to kind of give everyone the amount of data that gets produced. So just to give everybody a context, and I'm talking about a couple of, if you take the industries as holistic, smart cities, and these are very, very rough order of magnitude, smart cities can create up to 250 petabytes a day. Connected factories, which I know that you know, and I've seen that as well, that can generate up to 1 petabyte a day, right? And I'm being conservative in that, depending on how big the factories are, right, and how complex the stadiums in games can create 200 TB per game, right? And Olympics is going right now, so imagine the kind of data that is produced by every athlete. In every moment, the data can be as granular as the chipset onto their in their shoes. That talks about a lot of kinematics, but it can also be sensor based, how much they're sweating, their heartbeats, and all that, right? If you magnify by all the participants and all the people who are trying to participate for Olympics throughout this one, then it becomes quite big. Smart offices are 150 GB per day, vehicle is 5 TB, and I'm taking few reference points of the car manufacturers who are far ahead than the others, right? But there is a whole spectrum towards from 5 TB a day to 250 petabytes a day, right? So how does a technology provider or an executioner you do it, and what are the opportunities that bring over here? I think it's very clear that there is an IoT devices that are generating the data. And as the AI is coming in, more flavors of AI are coming in, right? There are some data that you're going to process on the device where the models are deployed over there, right? You're training the data over there. That means that the models are divided, and you don't have to go ahead and send all the data and train it on the cloud. I think that's one of the more emerging. Then there is a whole point of having edge over there. There are different pricing model available, so you're not charged for every API that you call over there. There are some static cost around the compute that you're paying per hour, so you don't have to pay ginormous amount for the data ingestion and training over there, right? So devices, and then comes the edge. There are huge opportunities in investment into these hybrid models as we're going along, especially if you correlate with AI. We are in the LLM models right now. We have seen the conventional ML training model. I think when it comes to, and this is my personal / professional opinion, as we go more and more scale solution on these, I think it's going to be more and more hybrid of these two, right? There is a space for both where you're trying to use the reasoning of LLM, but the correlation analytics and data science of the ML and trying to query each other with from there. So the highly trained model that are available, I think there would be a lot of smaller models available as they go that fits into a different breadth. And you already started seeing the operations. So if I go back to the question on what opportunities that happen on 8th of August, until the next 1 year, you're absolutely spot on. There are big bets on the LLM model, but there are huge opportunity when it comes from the legal professions on the compliance. When it comes from consultants, then how are you kind of creating those reference architectures and putting the processes across all these three spaces, so you don't get you get the right balance between these ones. So those are the emerging areas that I'm seeing as a technology provider in this space.
Yeah, I just had one thing. I do see on-prem, which a lot of people had started completely discarding, also come back.
Yeah, which is what I'm referring to as edge.
As edge. So I think, no, but not just for edge use cases, even for certain other use cases where it just makes sense, you know that the utilization. So I would say it is three. So you've got edge, you've got cloud, and then you've got some, again, this may be with larger, more traditional organizations where you've got a lot of legacy.
Yeah,
and
of course.
You're finding that, necessarily taking, that data of 20, 30, 40 years to the cloud does not make sense. And so you're, sort of parking it and saying, okay, fine, I can live with some of that sitting on-prem. So I think that's the other third piece that a lot of people had started doing away with, but they're now kind of, holding back on that. But yeah, I think a lot of that makes perfect sense.
You're absolutely right. It's a pendulum that swings back and forth as I see it, especially as a technologist over here, sitting over here. How put everything on prem? No. Put everything on cloud? No. Put everything on edge. Now it's about, okay, we have figured out the pros and cons and off, and then now we're going to do all together, combine our knowledge. So there are going to be a lot of. Industry is quite mature, but I think it's going to be more mature around there.
Okay, I think we have someone. I think Param probably wants to share something. Param, you there?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm logged in.
Just quickly introduce yourself, a brief introduction, and then ask the question. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Param Shah. I'm the director for FICCI for Europe. I also help a lot of tech startups go global and mentor startups themselves. And of course, my personal interest these days is I'm working on learning more and also working on the issues of AI governance and policy making. So that's the reason I'm here attending this, understanding more of what's going on. In terms of a question, how do you see the integration of digital twin technology advancing the goals of Industry 4.0, particularly in terms of improving supply chain transparencies and efficiency? I wanted to know the panel's view on this. Thanks.
So, should I take that, Vaibhav?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I think, Param, to your question in terms of building up the transparency and the resilience, for us at the Birla Chemicals, as I started saying, it actually started because of the pandemic. We realized that the proprietary systems that we had were not in a position to take on, some of the complex scenario planning, the complex decision making that we needed to do when we started this journey. At that point in time, we realized that we needed to start looking at more robust systems, more robust platforms per se, particularly, which could provide us that ability. So today we work with a platform partner, which allows us to do a lot of, scenario planning, doing a lot of simulation, using their platform. So given that, when you look at the digital twin, what we are doing with this platform is really looking at saying, can I do three things? One, can I build that transparency? Because I had my logistics team, I had my manufacturing team, I had my sales and marketing team, all three of them sitting in silos and doing their respective planning, bringing that in last minute and sometimes not adequately with enough detail to be able to inform the scenario planning requirements appropriately. I think what has happened by onboarding this platform, we have managed to actually create a digital twin of the entire supply chain planning. And that means that I am now able to see the end-to-end value chain of supply chain planning, across all the functions, and therefore it goes from planning to execution to backcasting of saying, if this is what I had planned for, whether it was the production planning, whether it was looking at the kind of customer orders that I was going to get, whether it was the logistics and the OTIF parameters that I had set in as targets for myself. Across, we've got about 25 different KPIs that we measure on a regular basis across these different functions, basis which we take a call on, how are we performing. But to answer your question, I think what the platform has allowed us to do is create the digital twin of the supply chain planning all the way to the execution, and then sort of measuring that, and that then allows us to very clearly understand that our variance between what we had planned and what we are actually delivering is sub 10% now. We've had it live for over a year now. And it is sub 10% as a figure. Can we optimize it further? The answer is yes. Can we go deeper in terms of causal? Up till now we were only doing correlations. Can we go down the causal route? With Gen AI on this, the answer is again yes. So those are areas which we are exploring to bring greater transparency, to bring greater insight, and to be able to manage, our supply chains and make them more resilient. Does that help? Does that answer the question that you had?
Yes, very much. Thanks.
Right. The only thing I just want to add onto that, from the technology point of view, there is an overarching AI legal or AI framework area that is going to be everywhere, which is the cross-pollination between the enterprise data and the public data, right? Putting the right guardrails, whether it's the upstream, I'm taking oil and gas and electricity, the right governance framework when it comes to data ingestion, training, and using any models for getting some analytical information out of these. There is an overarching thread that will go in each and every book of compliance and governance framework, which is the cross-pollination of data. Which of these data are stayed within the guardrails of enterprise that does not go and train at the back of LLM? And a lot of those guardrails are available in almost all the providers over here that they do. The second one, I think the second area which will be more organic as it goes along is would be around use cases basis, right? There are some low hanging fruit. If you're looking at, let's say, upstream, there is a lot of optimization that is going to happen in terms of routes, people planning, inventory, field workforce. So more of the governance frameworks are on those areas in terms of where we touch over there. And then comes the latter over there, which is, okay, now that we have touched the most important ones, we have got the most amount of efficiencies, and there would be a tail of the governance framework that would come towards the later stages. So if you're looking at supply chain over here, I'm taking oil, gas, and energy as an example, whether it's upstream, midstream, downstream. The common denominator is cross-pollination when you're trying to work with the public like the LLMs and your enterprise LLMs, and the second one would be on the use case basis. Those are the two broad scenarios that you can paint over here. Would you agree with that, Namrita, in terms of how we are categorizing it into these industries in your case as well?
Yeah, so it's interesting, Weber, because I think the way I'm looking at it is there is a very interesting development which has sort of picked up pace in India, and I know it's already been there in other parts of the world for a while. So I think you've had a lot of sustainability compliance, which also then talks about the kind of data that you are collecting, the kind of access that you're giving in terms of integrations across systems. So all of that is coming in from a sustainability lens also, and then you have the GDPR and other data privacy, sort of guidelines which are across different markets. And now you have the AI sort of, guidelines, you have the AI policies, and you have some frameworks which have come into play, some acts which have come into play in terms of legislation, with the EU AI Act being the first one. So I think there is a multitude of lenses through which you're seeing the same landscape. And some of it is overlapping right now. That's the way I'm seeing it, working across all of these different areas. So I think that is going to evolve over a period of time. But you're right in saying that, you're going to be looking at an increasing amount of sort of, governance and guardrails coming into play, whether it comes from a sustainability angle or whether it comes from from an AI angle or whether it comes from a third angle around data privacy.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions, Subhash or Param? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. No, I had a question around the creative industries and the way things are going as far as digital twin are concerned. So, and I'm not sure if this is the right forum because we've been talking more on industry, manufacturing, supply chains in bed. But I thought, why not take some views from the panel here on some insights or examples how digital twin is being utilized in the creative sector to enhance content creation and innovation, because I think that's where film production or digital content creation is now moving to. So I thought it would be good to understand more about it from you guys as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I work in media entertainment, which is covers journalism and all that. But before I kind of go and haul on all the questions, I just want to keep it to the floor as well. If anybody would like to add or answer that before I do, because
I think Ifat has raised her hand. So Ifat.
Hi, yes. I just had a question since we're talking about content creation and everything. So my name is Ifat Qureshi. I'm currently studying strategic marketing at Imperial College London. So given how the digital twin is looking at changing the manufacturing sector, the content sector, the media sector, I also had a question on how would these sort of communications bring about a radical change in the branding persona, or the branding positioning moving forward through content, different channels.
That's a tough one, but I'll try to answer that. Let me go back to the content creation first. See, if you look at the creative industry, let's start with the creative, because I think we talked about the creative, the content, and the branding, right? Those are the three different dimensions that we are looking over here. Creative industry, creation or generation, then distribution, and then operation, right? Those are the areas. I think there is a lot of talk, and I think we covered in the couple of previous episodes as well. How do we put the guardrails on terms of the content generation? And most amount of the those aspects are coming from the journalism, right? There's a lot of journalism that is created, and the exam question that I get when I speak to our customers over here is, how do we make sure that we still get the right of that we have created this content, and which also talks about your question is that this is protected by our brand. So if we create a news over here, how do we make sure that it's ours, we can claim that? And then second one is how do we put our brand on there? So I'm just gonna ask that, because that's I think the most asked question that I've been speaking. Microsoft right now is working case by case with the biggest agencies on the planet, where we have a arm called SILA, and we are working creating these frameworks as a catalyst with these organizations on how do you go ahead and protect the journalism when you create the content. The simple answer to that question, where we are on that right now, is you have a lot of archive data, historic data. As long as you're augmenting, and there are a lot of techniques to do it, RAG is one of them, as we call in Gen AI. As long as you're augmenting your data using an enterprise grade of LLM to generate new data, the information that you would get is quite unique to you, because the content that was created before was yours, that you have used to generate the new content is yours. So Olympics are happening, and let's say that I am the news agency A. I have covered Olympics previously for a particular country. If I use the tonality, the style, the information, and augment it within the enterprise so the data does not leak to the public, it's called enterprise Gen AI. If I combine these one and then try to create a new content, then the version I will get out of this will most likely be unique to what I'm producing, and then you go through your process to tweak before it goes into the publication, right? So that's one framework or technique that is allowing you to say something, this is mine. Then comes to your second question in terms of how do I put my brand over here? Most of the agencies and channels and journalists or broadcasters already have their brand over there, where these news are shared on their formal websites, on their formal WhatsApp channels, on their formal YouTube channels, or any other social media that they're trying to cover over here, right? So that's one of the areas how you protect what's yours. Now comes the technique of security in terms of watermarking or AI marking. How do you kind of say, hey, if you want to prove that this was produced by me, and if there's a clash between two different organizations on the same set of data, that's where a lot of legal frameworks are being built right now. If you're working with Microsoft, if you're working with one of these large agencies, or if you like to be part of those, then you're more than welcome to kind of go ahead and say, hey, we are working with these topmost brands of the country. You would like to work with Microsoft, partner over here, and then work with your legal team to create that framework. And that kind of support would be available to you over there as well. So that's one part of the content creation over here. The digital twin also occurs, and I'm going to use the same part over here in terms of the Olympics, because it's in the it's talk of the town these days. A lot of data, as I was saying before, from the athletes are created when they're doing the whatever event they are part of, right? That data right now, if you go before LLM generation, there are a lot of data operators who capture that data and own that data anyway right now today. Opta Sports is one of them that is working very largely into gathering the data. Then you have ESPN, you have Sky Sports. All these different brands have their presence over there where they're acquiring the data. The betting companies, right? The governance framework would be from how they use that data. It would be an augmentation over there. So that's the complete different side of digital twin. We are trying to replicate or simulate a match that has already happened, whether it's tennis or a 100-meter race that has happened, right? The data owners who have officially secured the data, they are going to create the guardrails around how it would be used when it's trained. I am working with in a sports industry from a very large data provider of sports. And we are going through a lot of new regulatory and regulations on what can you use this data in terms of AI training for and what you can't. So there is a whole aspect of that as well. So those has already been ingrained in terms of the contracts, how you do use your NDAs, etc. Does it answer your question in terms of creative industry, two different dimensions, journalism and the data?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
No, we have a number of questions, I guess. We've got Rakshit, we've got Suruchi. We'll take one by one. Rakshit, you want to go first?
Sure, no worries. I'm Rakshit Kapoor. I'm working with HCL Tech, leading the fintech partnerships and sales. So I had a question around fintech. Is there any use case of digital twins in the fintech industry? How can this particular technology be used for fintech, or it's already being used?
Namrata, do you want to take that one, or shall I just take that one?
I'm just trying to think of an example I can think of somebody who's already using it, Rakshit. So the answer is yes, it's already being used in fintech. I'm trying to come up with the appropriate example for you that I can share. So, but top of mind, I can't think of. I've not seen so many examples of digital twins, but it is being used. So the digital twins would typically be used. What I'm seeing, and that's why I'm struggling with the example. So in the last year or so, or the last 6-8 months, I've seen a lot of consumer digital twins come into play. Now you are using them predominantly, and this cuts across. Okay, so I'll just give my background. I spent my first decade in digital marketing and operations, and then the next one in manufacturing. So going back to that era and connecting the dots, since I have some understanding of that space, I saw a lot of the consumer digital twins come into play in the last 6-8 months for a lot of peers of mine who are working in that space. And I think fintech is definitely one of those spaces where they're trying to use digital twins to say, if I take out a new product, if I take out a new marketing campaign, how is my target, the personas that we typically create, if you're familiar from a marketing point of view, the personas that we create, how is this persona going to respond to this marketing campaign? How is this persona going to respond to this, new product that I launch in the market? Is it an alternative to consumer inciting? The answer is no. Or market research, the answer is no. But this is just an augmentation. And this is, again, very, very early days. I can come back to you, Rakshit, if you like. I had read up a couple of articles on this. I had spoken to one or two friends, but happy to circle back if that helps. Over to you, Vaibhav, if you have...
Yeah. So working with some of the fintechs over here, and there is only one which kind of comes at the top of my head that I've seen more and more, and that trend kind of emerged during pandemic as well, right? Many of the traders used to have physical devices sitting over there to make these large open trades, right? And the way I saw the entire trading was done, it was quite an amazing view where you have per trader at least 20-25 different operations happening simultaneously, where they're doing many operations via phones. So there's a whole next mesh of different traders online with each other, and the entire setup on the floor was accordingly. So imagine a lot of Zabras like devices or turrets that kind of sit over there. When the pandemic hit over here, then there was an urgency because you couldn't go to office to do those, and because of the security reasons, everything was within the physical boundaries of the premises. So one of the key areas that we saw, which very closely mimics to the traits of digital twin, is you had to create the entire digital replica of that infrastructure for these traders to continue to operate with the right security, but the replica of the infrastructure that was available as a physical device when they were making these large trades. So that is one of the most prominent use case that I've seen when it comes to fintech on digital twin, and that there was a huge spike on that when pandemic hit, because there was no access to the physical infrastructure. You had to create a digital twin of the physical infrastructure to operate within those high pressure and high financial transactions background.
I think the other one that I'm seeing in some parts of the world are just the virtual sort of, branch offices, or the virtual sort of, services that they provide, in terms of a digital twin of. So that's not so much of fintech, but that's more on the banking side. I've seen them, build up those, but those are more sort of conventional use cases.
Sure. Thanks so much, both of you. I was just curious to know these use cases, but thanks a lot.
Sure. Where's the next one, Subhash?
Suruchi, I think, yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Suruchi. I work as a measurement specialist and an analyst in enterprise car rental company. We're based out of US as headquarters. And in terms of digital twin, we have been trying to build a system where people can come to our branches and pick up the cars without actually interacting with the customers. To some extent, we have been successful in that way, but as far as launching it in Europe, it's very difficult navigating through the the existing GDPR and all the other regulations. So my question is around how, with whatever digital twins you guys have worked with, how has it been your experience navigating all the legal implications, the GDPR policies, and even as far as using the AI generated content? Even Europe has some evolving regulations. So how has this been addressed?
And before I answer that, because there is a stark difference depending on in terms of compliances, which part of you're talking about. Are you referring to more about Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Scandinavian countries? Which part of these are you more?
Yeah, if we can speak majorly to UK, France, I think that would be fine.
Okay, so the neighbors. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Namrita, do you want to take that one, or shall I?
Yeah, you can start and I'll come in.
Okay, so I happen to work with France and the UK at the same time in automotive. I spent quite a lot of time just before pandemic, by the way. I remember 2020, 2019, 2020 very clearly, just before the outbreak. See, when you are trying to create digital twin, GDPR is, I'm trying to put the right words over here because it can be interpreted in many different ways. The interpretation of GDPR that really helped us was, everybody thinks GDPR has a certain definition, which is entirely true. But there is a part of GDPR that is, I think I've seen less and less known in my interactions in different industries, and that is, you have a right to use data as long as you tell them what you're using data for. There are exceptions into those areas, right? GDPR does not mean that you can't use the data. right? That's the standard go through that everybody kind of jumps on over here. Please reach out to the legal arm, but there is a provision over here that I've seen more and more often used in these scenarios, where it's saying if it's absolutely mandatory for you to use, as long as you are very explicit about the reasoning why you're using these data and what for, and you're very clear about the residence of that data. Now, residence of that data is not about where the data is stored. Residence also kind of comes over how it came to the destination before it got stored over there, right? Are you using the systems that goes between the UK and France, or are you creating two replica systems over there where the French data stays within French provenance and the UK data stays within the UK governance? So depending on your technical architecture, how you are, what are your storage approach, what are your operational approach, what are your customer care approach over there when you're trying to serve your customer. These are the different technology decisions and methodologies that you can use. And basically the point that I mentioned about GDPR into these areas is how you can create an ecosystem. And when it comes to rental car, are you, whether it's fleet systems or whether it's the end-to-user systems, I like to believe when it comes to UK and France that problem has been solved, because I've seen those being solved over here, working over here. Majority of those kind of comes about is what is your ops model by end of the day, and what is your technology approach. That's the broad stroke I can give you over there. So look at your technical architecture, and then look at your processes that you have done as part of the customer care, where you're fetching the data from.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that answers. There are a lot of concerns around consent, taking the consent from the end users. So yeah, you're right. Technical architecture, local technical architecture is very important to roll this out here. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And then we have Russ. Russ, you there? Yeah, okay, cool.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much so far for a really informative discussion on this. I'm a dispute resolution lawyer, so I'm often a very interested observer for these discussions, and usually don't have a great deal to contribute other than to have praise for the panel and those contributing. More of a comment, really. I mean, obviously, you've actually picked up on the fintech sector and asked the question there. Just really to flag for the panel, I've seen digital twin being used in the architecture, engineering, construction sector, and it blew my mind when I came across it in about 2017. It was in connection with a dispute that I was dealing with, but the ability actually for there to be a digital twin of a physical building during a construction project where the various issues in the construction could be sort of dipped into daily by the various specialisms on site with a sort of continually updating system for people to check into, kind of blew my mind then. I haven't come across it since then. I haven't seen any great advances in that kind of tech, but certainly that's a sector in which I've seen it. And I was just interested to know whether, because we talked about content creation and not a great deal in fintech, but whether there were sector-specific examples that you can think of where this is really flying already and it's quite a regular thing that's being used.
Namrata, do you want to take this one?
Sure.
Okay.
So, Ras, if I'm understanding your question correctly, what you're saying is examples of where digital twins are flying, and you reference the construction industry and the architecture industry. So I think smart cities is the most classic example when you're looking at digital twins at scale with buildings, with architecture, etc. But I'm also seeing that happen across cities which were not planned smartly. So, for example, in Bombay, the city that I live in, there is an endeavor to create a digital twin. I'm seeing digital twins come up for a lot of the events and the structures which are created on a temporary basis around that. So I'm seeing that piece come in. I think every single sort of, um, building which has some kind of a historical relevance or has some kind of significance, is looking at exploring the building of a digital twin. And then it's not just the outer facade, but it's also from the inside. And there are a couple of examples that I'm seeing happen, for a lot of the touristy destinations, but I'm also seeing that happen in, financial capitals of the world. I'm seeing that happen across different parts of the world. So I think that's one area where you will find a lot of examples. I don't think we are short on those. That's my generic take on this, my personal take on this. I don't know, Webber, if you would like
to answer that kind of with a pointed answer. If you want to see the emerging trends into construction industry, I would recommend to go 2 places and keep an eye on the first is Project Neom in Saudi Arabia, right? That will kind of show you how this is evolving. And the second one is the upgrades that people are applying in theme parks, especially like with the likes of Disney's, right? The amount of technology that they have applied over there when they're trying to manage the theme parks and are quite phenomenal. So I think those are the 2 different places where I would keep my eye on, just to see how this, especially in this area, how the technology is emerging and what are the new trends over there. Does that answer your question? I read your lips. It says it does.
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else would like to contribute? Any other use cases anybody else has seen around in construction or any other cool industry? Like, hey, this is something I saw is really, really cool in this industry that we haven't talking about. Just kind of asking everyone if anybody over here has seen something that blew their mind.
Okay, I've got a question. I mean, this is not my question, though. I'm going to sort of read out from what I received from Gurshin. Gurshin is part of the Grant Thornton UK, and her question is, as I read, how can digital twin technology be leveraged to enhance the UK-India trade relations and investment opportunities? Could you share some examples of how this technology can streamline cross-border supply chains, improve product quality, and foster innovation between the 2 countries? That's a fairly meaty question.
Very. I do not know enough about UK-India trade relation in its current state to kind of provide my professional opinion on it. And I've learned enough. You don't know about something, you basically say, I don't know. So I'm just gonna say, like, over here, my knowledge into this particular part of digital twin is very limited. So I don't want to take an opinion on something that I do not know about. Namrita, I don't know if you had encountered with this area.
So, very similar to you, Weber, very limited understanding around the UK-India trade relations. Having said that, I think when you're talking about areas around product quality and supply chains, I think some of that we addressed. I don't know if you want to be more specific around that, then, I could try and throw some color, but that would be, again, more from a context of the function of supply chain or the function, or, looking at product quality rather than the UK-India trade relations perspective.
Yeah. But Subhash, I think previously we had a lot of experts on India-UK trade relations over here. Maybe we can, have a follow-up on this if we get later on.
Yeah, that should be okay, I guess.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, well, I don't see any question, but yeah, you can go ahead. Both of you can go ahead. I think we'll have someone asking very soon, but yeah.
Okay. So I think one of the cool things that I like to talk about in digital twin is, and that we are seeing more and more, is live sports has always been a very interesting area, at least for my particular one, where you talk about the matches that are going on, right? So right now we have a consumption pattern where you can go ahead, either you watch it on your TV or whatever device with the screen that you have, or you watch it live over there, right? And you need to consume it through somebody who has the rights of that particular content, right? But as technology is getting more mature and then it's getting cheaper by the day, there are some emerging patterns that, hey, do we need to get the broadcasting rights, or can we go ahead and create the 3D real-time simulation of live match happening? So there is more penetration into different geographies when you're trying to do this digital twin experience. Because when it comes to the broadcasting rights and acquiring those, that is very hefty and kind of proposition, and only few people can do. But as these data are becoming more and more widely available and democratized, then I think there is a lot more consumption pattern that will come out at the back of digital twin. You can go ahead and simulate the hands and legs movement of a player based on the AI analytics or whatever technology you want to use. So can you go ahead and create a version of a 3D live game which does not require the video broadcast rights of it? So there is a lot of R&D and engineering happening over there. So that's something I'm at least keeping my eye on, because that instantaneously should democratize the process of you need to have an IP or you have to watch it onto your TV. There are other formats that you can consume this media as well. Namrata?
So I'm curious, Vaibhav, on what you just shared. Are the fantasy games that we are seeing around, are they not already a version of it? Because they are inspired by a lot of the data that has been historically collected, and you're right. I think I'm aligned with you that as the data becomes richer, as we collect more data, there is more granular information on consumption patterns on each player, on each game, etc. That'll bring out much richer experiences. But I thought that we had already made a head start over there with some of these fantasy games which have been set up or
So that is correct. Partially, the only area that I would say is people or end users like us are engaging to play the game after consuming the data. We understand what has happened, we consumed it, and then allows it to play again. What I'm talking about is watching a live sport.
And playing it simultaneously.
Or do whatever, like the watch experience or consuming of that live sport experience. I think there is a lot that digital twin has to offer in that area, because camera as the capture device will not be the only format that can reroute it broadcasted, because the granularity of data that is going to get produced in sports can create can break the barrier of camera being only the capture device of that data. Sensors are bringing that data, and how much they bring over here and how everybody consumes it is going to open up into a lot more formats. So that's a slight different, what I would say.
Interesting.
So I have a question. If that now
Sure.
There's more from the media and content and communication side of the business. Maybe this is just sort of taking a leap out of what Ifad asked some time back. So now digital twin obviously has various connotations, various amplifications. One of the things also where I would like to sort of understand from your point of view, the whole ethics and sort of morality point of view, because that's also one big thing which is creating a big impact in today's communications part of it. And across all, be it sports, politics, though mostly politics. Now, how do you think is there a mechanism we can control that, which I don't think is an easy task, So yeah, I mean, that's what my question is. I mean, how do you think the digital twin or digital avatars and how that can be sort of tamed down to bring some amount of sanity and ethics and maybe a bit of process in the whole communication and personal point of view. So that's one. But before I just end my question, also this is for all the participants out here. There's a poll I've posted. Please share your views. That helps us to improve our sort of process. But yes, over to you guys, or anyone for that matter. Yeah.
Sure. I have a very short answer on this, and then I'll hand over to Namrita. One of the things that digital twin brings, and Namrita started that with that point over here when she talked about the use cases, is the transparency of what's happening where, right? It brings you a very complete transparency into the end-to-end process, what's happening where. So the facts are on your face, to put it very in a raw manner. What you do with those facts are there. So there is a lot of opinions and information and data. What digital twin does very brilliantly is bringing that data very transparently in whatever format you want to consume it, right? That reduces the risk of misinformation and opinion based. That's my point over here. And Namrita.
Yeah, I think that point is a good one. The challenge that I see happening, and we've talked about this previously also, is the challenge is that now when you start not looking at the digital twin in isolation, and as you bring the LLM world, along with it, which is, attempting to get more explainable, but right now is pretty much a black box. I think that is where you start having some challenges. So I think digital twins on their own give you that level of transparency, give you that level of flexibility, which is great. But I think when you start combining it with other technologies, that is where you start seeing some challenges, particularly over here when we're talking about AI, Gen AI, the LLMs in particular. That's where you will have an ethical challenge. The second thing is when you're looking at digital twins, the other big one for me is over there is in terms of the the security. And for a lot of, I think and this is not from a moral point of view, but just the security. I think for a lot of organizations, again coming back from a manufacturing lens, there was a lot of focus on the IT side of security. And I think over the last 2-3 years, that's rapidly changed. And, you start looking at the OT side of security. So that was a risk, not necessarily from an ethics and morality point of view, but that was a risk to be taken care of. I think those are sort of, the upside and the downside. Of course, as I said, once you start combining it and you start looking at, creating a digital twin, and now, if I earlier talked about autonomy, I talked about safety, etc. Those things come into play, and that can bring in more complications. So when you're saying, what is the ethics and morality? It's not about the digital twin in isolation. It's when you combine it with other technologies that some of these challenges get accentuated. Thanks. I don't know if that answers your question, Subhash, but yeah.
Well, as I said, there is no definite answer, but I understand where you're coming from. So appreciate this. Thank you. I think we've got the last question of the day. Gautam?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Very, very informative sessions. Thanks for that. My question is, what are the main challenges in integrating digital twin technology in existing legacy systems? And how can they be overcome? Especially I'm from the CPG sector and EdTech sector, and usually I have elaborate technological infrastructure existing. So how do you transition, and what are the challenges you have faced? It would be great if you can share your insights. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure. I think, Vaibhav, should I take a stab at it? Okay. So Gautam, I think for us, that was also one of our challenges at the outset. And fundamentally, you're talking about some of your larger systems over here. So initially as your integration points. Your ERP typically is a starting point because a lot of your financial data is sitting over there. You'd be looking at your CRM systems per se because a lot of your customer data is sitting there. And then if you have a supply management system or associated portals, customer portals, etc., those are the ones that you want to integrate. I think the key aspect is defining that in your design right up front, in terms of saying that these are the the systems which are going to get critical for me when I'm looking at an end-to-end digital twin being created for even if it's CPG. There's a fair amount of manufacturing behind that if I was to look at it from that point of view. So I'd say looking and planning for that. The API is available today for most of your standard software solutions. And similarly, if you take any of the state-of-the-art or even tier 2 SNOP platforms or digital twins, which are enabled through these SNOP solutions, you would find that they will allow you to integrate fairly seamlessly. So I don't think for us the challenge was over there. The challenge was mostly in terms of the data quality, and I think ensuring that our master data were robust, of a certain quality. The KPIs that we had were aligned across all the different functions, because the definition of a KPI for a finance team and for a logistics team and for a marketing team and for a manufacturing team, you take one KPI, ask the 4 departments, they'll give you a different definition. So I think for us, a lot of it was around the engineering, not of the tech, but the engineering of, the processes. We re-engineered all the processes. We reset all the KPIs. We looked at saying, what is the change management that is required? Those parts were as big as the deployment of the tech platform, And again, while that sounds like 101 of any digital transformation project, but the reality is, this is where, things fall between the cracks. So I'd say the tech integration, I'm not saying it was a cakewalk, but yeah, relatively easy.
Right. Any more questions? Any thoughts?
No, thank you.
Good. That was the last question of the evening. First of all, thank you, Namrita, for joining all the way from India, staying up so late in the evening, or to say late in the night. It's already tomorrow for you, while it's still today for us. So thank you once again. Vaibhav, thank you as always for being a great supporter of Tech Tuesdays. And thanks to the wonderful participants out here, guests out here. Before we sign off, a couple of quick pointers. I'm not sure how many of you know, on the 9th of July, we'd organized a Tech Tuesdays Extra episode. This was in association with the High Commission of India, London, at the India House. The topic for this special episode was AI landscape in India and the UK. Apart from the fact that this episode was extremely engaging and interesting for people who were there in person, we're also getting a lot of traction on this on the social media, primarily on YouTube and LinkedIn. In fact, the episode video, which is right now live on the Tech Tuesdays YouTube channel, has already crossed 10,000 views. So just in case you have some extra time, about an hour and a half in your hand, I would really advise you to view the discussion and share your comments and thoughts. So that's number one. Moving on, the next episode of Tech Tuesdays UK is taking place on the 3rd of September, and the topic for discussion is space tourism. Given that our current venue, Royal College of Radiology, is not available for the month of September, our hosting partner, which is Greenwoods Legal LLP, has kindly organized 110 Rochester Row as the next location for the next episode. For information, 110 Rochester is somewhere very close to the Victoria Station. And last but not the least, as I mentioned earlier, we will reach out to some of you for your media bites over this particular week. So you may expect an email or a WhatsApp or a call from us. Kindly budget about half an hour, 45 minutes, which will help us to get your media bites, and which will obviously later published across all our social media. Okay, that's it from my side. Thanks to each one of you for being here, for attending the episode. I'm sure you enjoyed it. Please post your comments on social media, tagging #TechTuesdaysUK. And I guess that's about it. Enjoy the evening and see you in the next episode of Tech Tuesdays. Thank you. Thank you to each one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.